Welcome back, everyone. Good morning, and thanks so much to our first panelists for getting the morning off to a great start. My name is Amelia Kahl, and I'm the Associate Curator of Academic Programming. And typically when I give my job title, I get a lot of polite and slightly confused smiles. So let me tell you what a Curator of Academic Programming does. So what my job is to connect Dartmouth students and Dartmouth faculty with works in the Hoods collection. And I do this quite broadly. We have quite a large collection, about 65,000 objects. But one area that is used really heavily is our contemporary photography collection. Contemporary photography allows students to grapple with issues in our world in a way that is different from looking at other media. Photography seems somehow more immediate, more relevant, and sometimes more objective, though we often encourage students to think about the choices the photographer is making to construct an image, that sort of sheen of objectivity is really very superficial. And one of the ways that we work with photography is both curricularly and also co-curricularly, and it has been the focus of our Museum Collecting 101 class. This is a non-for-credit class offered annually since 2002. And in this class, a group of 12 Dartmouth students, they can be any year and any major, get together and they select a photograph for the museum to purchase. In fact, this year's group is heading to New York tomorrow morning on the 6:30 a.m. bus. And you can see 12 of the photographs collected by the students upstairs in the exhibition Consent, Complicating Agency in Photography, that was co-curated by 5 interns, last year's Hood interns. So I encourage you to take a look at that show. And the reason that the museum collecting students are offered photography rather than prints or paintings or sculpture or some other media is for a couple reasons. I mean, I'll be frank, in 2002, budget was a consideration. But also because photography seems to be a relatable way to introduce students to art acquisition. This generation of students creates their own digital images so frequently that it's very rewarding to introduce them to the complexity of fine art photography. So I'm thrilled to introduce our 2 panelists today who will be sharing their own work with us and talking about some of the issues in contemporary photography. The format will be similar to the morning session. Each artist will present around a 15-minute talk. We'll have a few minutes of conversation amongst the 3 of us, and then we will open it up to questions from all of you. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Markus Brunetti. Brunetti grew up in Bavaria and studied in Munich, and today he travels widely across Europe with his partner, Betty Schöner, as part of his project, Facades. Brunetti's first solo exhibition in 2014 was presented at the Museum of Applied Art in Cologne. His work is held by many collections, including the Chazen Art Museum in Madison, Wisconsin, the David Winton Bell Gallery at Brown University in Providence, the Musée des Beaux-Arts Le Locle in Switzerland, the National Gallery of Canada, and the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. So please join me in welcoming Markus Brunetti.
Hello together, and thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy that our work of Köln is placed in the Hulleah Museum collection. And I want to thank Bob Gray making this possible by his enormous cultural engagement. It is an honor for me to introduce you in our facades. This is Köln. Some of you have seen it. Our long-time project to capture facades across Europe started in May 2005. We started for 2 years, and now we are, after 15 years, still on the road. If I say we, it means Betty and me. We are partners in life and work for 19 years. Betty says hello from Lisbon. She stays in Portugal during my time here in Hanover. Betty is 4th-generation photographer, born in Dresden. She grew up in her grandma's and her father's darkroom and studio. Her grandfather and her grandmother were photographers, and her father is a well-known architectural photographer in Dresden. On the right, you see her in the 90s, next to her father, some years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. She photographed for artists and galleries besides her own projects. My grandfather came from Italy to Germany in 1911. He became a builder and architect. You can see him with a church construction map in the 50s. My grandfather and my great-uncle took over the business, and their sons worked as builders and architects as well. You can see my grandfather as a student in his masterclass. My father worked as an architect here in the studios in the 70s. I was born into this family in 1965. You can see me here on the right on my PlayStation. I grew up with building and architecture everywhere, at the kitchen table, at the family meetings, at my parents' friends. So you can see we are both deeply influenced by our family traditions. Here I'm with my first sketches of a facade. This shows clearly my first attempts drawing a church orthogonal. My first roller cord 6x6 in the black and white darkroom I got some years later with about 10 years. Photography and drawing was nearly all that present in our family. Some years later, during the study, I started with my own company. My office became continuously bigger and developed as fast as the new computer technology. We worked in advertisement and lived in an over 500 years old castle near Munich. Worked 20 hours a day, 365 days for many international brands. After 20 years, we got nearly bored but not frustrated. At my 30th birthday, the question came over, why using all my skills only for others? Why only for fast imaging, displaying for a decade, and been forgotten before the invoice was paid? It was a time for absolutely change. What we finally needed was a discreet studio with kitchen, bath and bedroom. For that we bought a truck chassis, designed a very pure box, painted it grey, to be nearly invisible in the nature, and our castle on the road was ready. How Ansel Kiefer said, the studio is not a fixed building or nor a static place, it's more a sense, a feeling, a status, a condition. By our first trip to Scandinavia, we were thinking and testing for a new project with the luxury not being disturbed anymore. We already thought about several projects during our working period, but there was never time for any practicing. Many aspects gave us the direction for the facades. Our own history, photography experiences, composing profession in the digital world, knowledge of architectural drawing and perspective, and an immense will to do. For creating portraits of houses of faith in a new level of presentation. For 9 years we developed, tested, experimented, overpainted our works, not influenced by any others. Not shown to anybody to beware of any influence, quasi full incognito. The view on our portraits enormously changed year by year, so we developed our own hand script. All this process is still going on until today. There is more and more selection, reducing strengths in our series. Facades are miracles of technology over hundreds of years, symbols of human creative power in stone and wood. By our photographic work, we will bring the recorded reality to its maximum presence, completely with our inner feeling for it. A democratic view brings the different facades into a neutral comparison. Essential that each work contains its full story, with all its details, but without any disturbing things. It should it should animate the viewer to see, to combine and create own curiosity. For an explanation, please see Chartres. We studied all drawings as a base for our idea of the series, using them to find the right proportions and the perspective which you mostly cannot see at the original site. There is no classical way to create a photographic view in that ideal form. An absolute perfection does never exist. All is subjective. See here our final version and vision of Chartres. It is still necessary to find the right word for describing our doing. Our work is not pure photography. You cannot only press the button for getting such results. We deconstruct the real buildings in small pieces and reconstruct our facades piece by hand. So you can say, we paint with countless single shots. Rearrange the facade stands for us in its perfect shape. By all the pre-organization of our facades, every new one we visit keeps surprises. Many tourists all day, Chinese groups often before sunrise, fences, houses, cables, advertisement, flags, buses, cars, the wrong weather, and so on. Or in addition, a lot of green. Not that we don't like green in the city. Over the time, we learned to handle it mostly. Let me show you another aspect of our work at the Duomo di Santa Maria Assunta of Orvieto. It was important for us to find a form that we should the whole, but also reflecting as many details as possible. Details are so extreme on the Orvieto facade, the infinite diligence of the artisans, the megalomaniac ideas of the architects we want to transport. It was always about competition of the builders, and they often moved on the border of the possible or above. If you see the whole facade of Orvieto in this resolution, like normally nobody can see, it's incredible. Our wish is to transport as much as possible of this fascinating handcraft. Discovering a facade is for us nearly like reading a good book. We always think all those buildings are built for eternity, but we have seen by the terrible inferno of the Notre Dame de Paris how fast icons of our culture can be destroyed. Not only Paris was hit with a fire on the roof, Nantes was 2015 in the same situation. Another example is the Frauenkirche Dresden, during the World War II destroyed and completely rebuilt between 1993 and 2005, with the support of worldwide solidarity. This can be continued as well with Reims, hurt by the German troops in World War I. Let me now change back to our work. Our intention was to find a way to bring the different styles, forms, height, ages, religions, local particularities in a row to compare them all, creating a series of comparative portraits from houses of faith. We defined some rules we want to adapt to each work, all selected in our decision, all with central view, all in total focus, all with even light, all from distance with existing perspective, all with their own identity, all with the same respect, all with maximum information, all reduced to the main subject. All can stay next to each other or alone. Amazing how the series get more powerful by more diversity. Studying the architectural history is also an intrinsic part of our work. For instance, Order 3 has been started to build in the 12th century. The spires of the Ulmer Münster and the Kölner Dom have been finished at the end of the 19th century. Chartres in the middle instead had the right spire already finished around 1150, and the left spire in flamboyant style later around 1500. Not only the architectural flagships are part of our series, there's one missing. No, this one, it's mixed. Not only the architectural flagships are part of our series, the stave churches of Norway, some of them are more than 800 years old, showing us a special culture of the high north of Europe. Originally built by shipbuilders, they have their own style. The Orthodox churches we already started to capture in Bulgaria, Lithuania, Estonia, and Germany gives us a new aesthetic. They will be enlarged in the next years with examples from Russia, which is a huge part of geographic Europe until the Ural Mountains. Currently, we expanded the facades with the first synagogues from Eastern Europe. Further on, we will capture more facades from Western Europe as well. We are surprised to find again so different synagogues in Europe after the terrible Nazi time. We want to show European architecture culture in all its different styles, neutral, without any political or religious guidelines. We know there cannot be any completeness. The idea is to create an overview of diversity. Another term. Since 15 years, we are quasi working in our own facades universe. If possible, we park with our studio on wheels as near as allowed at the facades for testing, recording, and for all first sketches. If necessary, we wait until the weather fits, to get a permit, until the buses leave, and so on. We are fully employed with further facades. We can proceed in the meantime. Living near the facades is also necessary to make structural analyses. For getting the first idea, most of the year we live and work like this on location. Some facades we have selected are not ready for recorded by our first visit. We have to come back sometimes more than once. For Köln, we come back 5 times over 7 years. After 9 years, we showed the facades to the public in 2014. The empathy and the support was incredible. We decided to continue with the facades project, and we named it now Grand Tour of the Facades. We invested in a new truck with additional powerful technique, brand new 20-year-old Daimler, ex-firefighter from Swiss military as a perfect base. We constructed a new grey box. All the interior was built by ourselves with newest technique, all optimized for the project. Maximum of space for work, some for kitchen and some for living. For work and life in a 100% independent way. The neutral gray outside is also perfect for checking prints and doing corrections. For instance, at the Guadalquivir River, south of Seville in Spain last month. So we see, we live the project 24/7 everywhere. The silence and power of nature we need for our work. Last winter, we made a rest from European culture for 3 months in the Moroccan desert, only to work out existing recorded facades. The surrounding became for us more and more a higher element. Here, for instance, we worked and lived for 3 weeks beside the fantastic artwork of the German artist Hans-Jörg Voth. His installation Orion, you can see at the horizon, is situated in the middle of the Malha Desert near Zagora. He lived and worked there for nearly 30 years, all winter times. Back in Europe, we spent the last, there's one missing, sorry. Living 24/7 formed us a big wish list of further facades we want to create. We choose many by studying books, many were recommended by locals, and the internet is also very helpful for research. A lifetime project, it became a passion. There are so many further aspects in the facades, I cannot bring them rudimentary into a 15-minute talk. You can see there is still so much untouched area on the European map. The Grand Tour continues. Thank you for your attention.
I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker, Cara Romero. Romero is a photographer living and working in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She shows at both the Santa Fe Indian Market and the Hurd Indian Art Market, where she has won ribbons at both. In 2017, Romero received the Visions for the Future Award from the Native American Rights Fund. Her work is featured year-round at the Robert Nichols Gallery in Santa Fe and has been shown at the Rainmaker Gallery in Bristol, the Form and Concept Gallery in Santa Fe, the Peters Project in Santa Fe, and Beauclay in Minnesota, as well as the Four Winds Gallery in Pittsburgh. Romero was born in Inglewood, California, and raised on the Chemehuevi Valley Indian Reservation, and later in Houston, Texas, and Santa Fe. She studied photography at both the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe and Oklahoma State University. Let's give a warm welcome to Cara Romero.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you so much to the Dartmouth staff for their wonderful hospitality. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, John. Thank you, Morgan, Molly, Amelia, for putting everything together and rolling out the red carpet for us. I've never been to Dartmouth before. Morgan, thank you for giving me the in-depth history that we're both on Abenaki land, as well as the history of Dartmouth as an Indian school, as well as the vision in the 70s to reconcile with the indigenous community and create the Native Studies and Native Museum programs that I can attest through both my family and myself have touched many Native American lives. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me here. My name is Cara Romero, and I was born in Inglewood. Born and raised on the Chimwavy Valley Indian Reservation, which is in the heart of the Mojave Desert, the hottest place in the United States, close to Death Valley. My reservation is 41 miles on the California waterfront of the Colorado River, so also a fertile valley there on the border of California and Arizona. It is a very rural community, about 250 miles from the county seat of San Bernardino. That very much informed my experience, as well as later on in life moving to Houston, Texas with my mom, who was a newly single mom and had an urban experience as well. All of those form my identity, and you'll see those experiences come through in my artwork as a biracial artist, a Native American artist, and both urban and rural experiences. I'm also, for a little less than a decade, been a program director for the Bioneers Indigeneity Program. It's a national nonprofit. I've been the director of their indigenous programming at a conference. I work with youth, I work with environmental and social justice activists across Indian country, putting together a conference and the world-renowned Indigenous Forum, where we create critical dialogue around environmental and social justice issues, some of the most pressing issues facing Indian country today. You'll also see in the work that informs my process, especially my content and the stories that I like to tell as I'm communicating from an indigenous perspective to the mainstream world. My work is sometimes called whimsical and complex. It's multi-layered as far as the content goes, and I really think it speaks to checking preconceived notions about what Native American art is, what Native culture looks like, and how our indigeneity presents in modern day. I'm really interested in creating multiple narratives for Native Americans, countering stereotypical ideas of what Native American photography are, about what modern Native American peoples are and look like, and how we experience being indigenous peoples in everyday life in America. I'd like to take you on a walk through some of my work and talk about some of the ideas from conception to the production of the photographs. And as Lalla said, the life that they live after you make them is sometimes an amazing journey in and of itself. Most recently, I participated in the Desert X Biennial. It was a land-based art installation in Coachella Valley, which is the ancestral territory where I'm from. It was my first public art experience, and it was outside of an institution where they gathered 25 international artists to create land-based art installations in Coachella Valley in response to the landscape. I was the only Native American that was selected to respond to the landscape, which I considered an incredible responsibility on behalf of the Native American community in Southern California, and wanted to do honorable visual communication for many, including my own tribe and the many tribes that share Coachella Valley. I worked with Amanda Hunt on creating 5 billboards that can be seen from Palm Springs to Los Angeles. And the concept that I came up with was a series called Jackrabbit, Cottontail, and Spirits of the Desert. Jackrabbit and Cottontail are from our mythology when animals were once people. And I worked with 4 young boys from my community at the Chimwavy Valley Reservation in recreating these mythological characters as time travelers that have come back and to visit their sister tribes in Coachella Valley and ground people, the modern Southern California people that come for the Coachella Music Festival, the people that live in Palm Springs and Indio, in the idea, really ground them in the idea that they're on Indian land. And in Southern California, and all of California, we have one of the most brutal colonial histories in the United States, and California Indians experience a great amount of what I would say is invisibility, and misunderstanding and misrepresentation for who and what we are. So this was a great celebration of our resilience I worked with children to show that not only are our ancestral beings here with us, but that we're still here and that our future is bright. As you come along the billboards, there's 4 boys from our Indian reservation. This one is called Spirits of Siwabaats. These are all 4 little cousins, and this is a truck that sits across from my house on the reservation. The little boys throughout the series appear in different landscapes. And while they both represent themselves, they also represent something larger and more spiritual. This piece is called Kyani, and this is the first piece as you come into Palm Springs that you see. Kyani is 7 years old, and I think he carries 1,000 ancestors in his eyes. His grandfather, David Chavez, was instrumental in championing me and cheerleading me on as a young 20-year-old from the reservation to become a photographer. And that was desperately needed encouragement because it was not a commonly practiced medium within our culture 20 years ago. And anyways, I just love that piece. This one is called Evolvers. They're 2 sets of brothers, Winka, Kyani, Curtis, and John. And this was staged, as many of my pieces are, but also very candid. These are how little boys play together. I wanted to do something in the iconic landscape of Palm Springs. I wanted to ground people in the indigenous worldview of Southern Californians, and specifically Chemehuevi, that our ancestors are always here with us in the landscape, experiencing the changes around us, and that we're not separate from the landscape, that indigenous peoples are ontologically tied to the landscape, so it defines us. We emerge from place, we stay here, and all of our ancestors stay here with us as development changes. It's called Evolvers, but it's meant to look a little bit sci-fi, so if our ancestors came back to experience the large windmills there in Palm Springs, would they run away? Would they find them scary? This is Indian Canyon. This is the entrance to a very sacred area to the Cahuilla and Southern California peoples of Coachella Valley. And this is, again, Kyani on the rock, and it's meant to evoke that idea that our spirits are there in the landscape, watching over us, protecting the landscape. This was taken at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Before first light, you can see the light hitting the mountains back behind it. To create the long panoramic images, there are actually 3 photos stitched together for all of the panoramics that you see as part of the Billboard series. One of the most powerful experiences for me creating public art on a medium like billboards was the concept of propaganda and advertisement, and the privilege of being able to rent a space for your own invisible and underrepresented community. What would you want to advertise? And I worked with Diego as a huge influence in my life on this particular piece. In Coachella Valley, we have a large migrant, immigrant community there with us, and there is a lot of ancestral ties as Southern California Native Americans and many Native Americans in the Southwest, that our ancestry traverses the border, pre-colonial times. And I wanted to acknowledge in a very loving way and in a very modern way that we didn't believe in a wall as Indigenous peoples. And it's meant to look like the spirits came back and left a little Banksy on the wall. This is part of a series called First American Girls, and Diego and I have a now 15-year-old daughter, but the series started when she was 11 or 12, and we're avid toy and doll collectors, and comic books, and that there's a lack of representation of Native American girls in the dolls, that we were struggling to find an accurate representation. There's often a pan-Indian look, even with American Girl dolls and some of the others. And so I decided to create what I would like to see, and that began with building a life-size doll box and working with several different tribes. I'm hoping that this project goes on indefinitely, and that we're able to celebrate the diversity of the many forms of regalia, the traditional ecological knowledge that comes with making that regalia. So we built a life-size doll box, and then we began the graphic design with each family. So a little bit about the process is that I'm working with the mothers and with the daughters on what their doll box will look like, and choosing, for example, on this, we faced the box with, it was wallpaper, but it was wallpaper that happened to be a vernacular of Chumash people. That's used in modern street couture, and it represents the design work of the pine cone. So that's the black and white feeling. Working with the model on what color she wanted the inside of her box to be. We are California girls, we wanted hot pink and black and white. So that was where that color combo came from. And the use of color is really interesting in my photography. I think it just instantly lets the viewer know that these are modern, which in contrast to what Curtis and many of what's known as Native American photography has been for a century, is just a simple way to scream, we're modern, we're now, this is happening right here and today. This is Naomi Whitehorse. She's from the Chumash, the northernmost band, therefore called the Northern Chumash, the people of San Luis Obispo. She has accoutrement, items that are important to the modern Chumash woman. She's holding dance sticks. There's a bundle of tule behind her, which is the center of the cultural resource universe of the Chumash people. Basket hats that she would change into if she needed to, different dance belts, a winnowing basket, a musical instrument. I think what's really interesting as we look at a couple of these pieces that came through is unique to many of our Native American cultures is the amount of love that goes into adornment and creating regalia for our youth. Sometimes you'll see a piece later on where it took 5 family members over a year to make the regalia. We could talk about street value. It's not really important. It's the heart value. It's the love that goes into collecting the items, touching the same traditional ecological items of your ancestors, the impacts of climate change on that gathering process, and just the absolute love that goes into making the regalia for the daughter. This is Hulleah Romero. This is our niece from Cochiti Pueblo. She's got the Cochiti pottery beeweed design on her box, meant to look like Cochiti pottery. Most of the, I should just say all of the models that I work with are friends and family. That really helps me stay true to identity, authentic to story, and it helps with the collaborative process and making sure that we're getting it right, especially working intertribally. She's got her grandmother's blue corn behind her, her grandmother's items from the wall, and Diego's great-grandfather's and father's drum up in the corner. This is Wakia. All of the images are titled with not Comanche Kiowa woman, but actually the young woman's name to give agency to the women for who they are. It has a dual purpose of both expressing a story of their very own identity as well as recognizing them as living people. She is wearing a southern buckskin, a traditional dress that's used in powwow competition. This is the one that took 5 family members over a year to make. These pieces are big, so it also allows the viewer that contrast between what you might find in a truck stop that has large pony beads and disappointing ideas of what our regalia looks like, for the viewer to really step inside the architecture of the photograph itself, but also the regalia. And again, that love and the craftswomanship or craftsmanship of each individual piece, and hopefully find awe and reverence and just respect for the culture. This piece is called Kahl. The concept for this piece was from an anecdote that was written about my husband's artwork, the practice of Pueblo pottery. And Clay Woman is an entity of the clay. She is a spirit of the clay that is warm and subtle and inviting to work with, but that no man can ever master. She's temperamental and firing, and I thought that that was such a great metaphor for many women. I chose to work with a living clay artist on personifying Clay Woman. Her hair is captured at 1/8,000th of a second. She's painted in clay from my reservation, and she has a second image of a Mesa Verde vessel superimposed onto her skin, creating this idea that the spirit of Clay Woman has been passed down to her through thousands of years. This one is called Last Indian Market. This is 13 artists from Santa Fe and our intertribal artist community of Santa Fe coming together to be in a portrait with Buffalo Man, who is an iconic performance artist. It's also Marcus Ammerman. I can go through quickly. It's Chris Eyre, Amber, Don Bearrobe, Diego Romero, Darren V. Hill Gray, Kathleen Wall, Marcus Ammerman as Buffalo Man, Marion Denapaw, Pilar Agoyo, Steve Lawrence, Chanupa Hans-Galuger, Linda Loma Haftawa, and America Meredith. This piece was a beginning step for, I would say, finding my voice that began and continued to emerge as a contemporary Native photographer. It was an aha moment for me because of the humor, as well as very authentic to establishing our understanding of mainstream culture. So while this is not a glimpse into our culture, it's instead a statement that we understand your culture too and are living it and amidst it. This piece is called Coyote Tails #1. So this draws on the story of the trickster of Coyote. These, again, are friends and family. That's Ka and Dina that show up in several of my photographs. Coyote is Ka's husband. And a 1964 Impala lowrider, which the photograph is taken in the heart of Espanola, New Mexico, the heart of lowrider culture. And this was an examination on our representation along other mainstream and subcultures there in the area of how our indigeneity also exists within those arenas. This is a really fun piece in front of Saints and Sinners Tavern. This piece is called Water Memory, and the series, there are 3 of them from 2015. They were a response to historical, present day, and future flooding of Indian lands due to hydroelectric energy, climate change, and modern flooding, and how indigenous peoples are affected disproportionately by those practices and climate change. This is, I chose models that were from tribes that were friends first, but that were from tribes that had, like my tribe, been affected by flooding, either hydroelectric or climate change. This is Chinoopahanska Luger, who's both from Standing Rock and the Fort Berthold Reservation. They were flooded out of their ancestral lands to make Lake Sacagawea in the name of hydroelectric energy, placed on top of a chunk of clay, and then they found oil. This one is up in the gallery upstairs. This one is called TV Indians. If I were to describe it quickly, I would say that this is a postmodern Curtis. There's a lot of social commentary in there. There's also a lot of dreamscape and surreal elements in it. It is about environmental degradation and accumulation of new ruins in the landscape. We put together, I think it was about 30 TVs, and had help stacking them out on a mesa overlooking Galisteo Basin. These are 4 intertribal Pueblo peoples, including my daughter on the left, Ka again, our son Santiago, who is alumni from here at Dartmouth, and Dina DeVore on the right with her baby. This also brings into just the discussion, or as you view it, things will pop up for the viewer. It's called TV Indians because the representations on the TVs are stereotypical images of how we're portrayed in the media, contrasted with what we actually look like. It brought up for me cultural privacy and this idea that we actually exist in a world that's very private and not understood compared with how we're portrayed in the mainstream media. I think another nuanced piece about the images that we chose to be on the TVs were that while they're completely stereotypical, in a nuanced way, they're not completely offensive. They're things that we grew up with, that we're familiar with, like Little Big Man and Iron Eyes Cody and Billy Jack. So while they're false representations, we instantly know and recognize them as Native peoples. That's what I have today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of our talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Markus and Cara, for your presentations. Seeing them both back to back, it strikes me how critically important detail is to both of your works, and how that detail creates a strong sense of identity, whether that's an identity of a person or a particular building. And so can you talk about the balance between the particularity of an individual and the continuity of an overarching aesthetic in your work?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Okay.
Should I start?
Go ahead.
No? Okay. First of all those buildings with the facades are built for one idea, to pray a Lord. So this makes them all equal in one row. Later on, we had created our rules, I told before. In addition, we have the situation of a lot of other things disturbing us on the real sides. But we try to arrange with each facade more and more to bring them on one visual level, that they get the same right, the same respect from our sides to the builders and to the craftsmanship. They really build it. So we are only reproducers, transporting them to another level. But we want to bring this silence we feel on the site, if we go there, if we get the spirit of those places, even they are old or young. For instance, you have seen the stave churches of Norway. They are influenced by each other in a local area, in a small territory. On the other side, they are over long distances influenced as well. You have, for instance, in Trondheim, the Nidarosdomen. This was influenced by going a bishop from Norway to London in the 12th century, coming back with the idea to get an own cathedral in Scandinavia. So the influence was from Westminster Abbey influenced to Norway. Westminster Abbey itself was a role model. The role model for it was Reims. There was a master coming from Reims to London to create a similar shape like they did in Reims. So all these things together, we saw as a red line for our vision to create our own view, to bring that into the series. And that makes it for us that long time, very deeply testing, checking, doing it once, doing it twice, doing 3 times. So what you have presented outside, the Cologne Dome, is the 3rd version. 2 versions we destroyed. You have all in front of your eyes the sketching of the monkey going to the upward walking man. And the same building up these facades in that type of shape, in that silence, we created in our own intimacy for this 9 years without being disturbed and influenced. Because if you go out with a new idea of a new visualization, you immediately get asked why you do that in addition. So therefore, this silence of living in another way, I showed you the 180 degree difference from living before in the well-situated castle, going out into the living like monks together as a couple in the middle of nowhere and starting to create an own visualizing. So this was the process. I can explain you for days what happened later on with us, even as well in the partnership. Because first we had the 800 square meter, you go to the west, I go to the east. 2 days, everything is fine. But now we're sitting together in 18 square meters, and a lot of different things happens. So that's my part for this.
I started out in black and white film and moved over to a commercial degree. So my first degree was in black and white fine art photography, film, 35 millimeter and medium format, and left the Institute of American Indian Arts making silver gelatins and really recreating what at the time in 1999 to 2001, what was known as Native American photography was really black and white, sepia, figurative images in landscapes with natural lighting of Native Americans. And I considered my work very disingenuous to my own identity and really wanted to quit. But actually went on to get another degree in commercial photography and photography technology, where I learned all of the technology of the times, including modern lighting, use of color, layout, graphic design. And when I came back to my art practice after the birth of my first son, there began a great fusion and a great aha moment where I realized that all of these modern techniques were actually our identities as modern Native peoples, and that we were in color and that we were amidst pop culture, but yet we had never been represented that way. So I think my aesthetic is the aesthetic of mainstream culture, graphically and use of color and commercial lighting. And the identity stories are very intimate, interpersonal relationships with my friends and family so that we can stay really close and true to what those stories are. I think when people come to work with me on an identity story, they know my artwork by now, and they're engaged and want to work in that aesthetic.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned in my introduction that upstairs there's a student-curated show called Consent, Complicating Agency in Photography. So what role does consent play in your work and in photography more generally for you?
So for us, traveling all over Europe, it's not like in the United States. You have nearly the same rules going to the next part of it. In Europe, we have a very complicated system, especially for us, working in public areas, working sometimes in private areas, behind the fences, working sometimes in monasteries, so you have to go behind the walls and ask for permit. We arranged us as far as possible with all those rules. Sometimes it's very easy, sometimes you get a heartily welcome, so we spent last year, for instance, in Kosovo, in the Kyani monastery. It's a fantastic place, still protected by the KFOR troops. 250 soldiers look only for 7 monks. So they welcomed us in an incredible way. So they were crying after 15 days as we were leaving. On the other side, they had the same situation on many places. On the other side, there was a visiting in Romania, at the Romanian Moldovan monastery. And the main sister would not open herself for me to talk for 5 minutes. So I only got the secretary, the second secretary, the third, the fourth, the fifth, 7 sisters. So I reached the 6th, but never the 7th. And she blocked me out, and she said, no, pay $500 or 500 euros, otherwise you leave. So it's not the term of the money, it's the term of the reflection, it's the term of the idea behind our living, behind our whole project. So if you have this passion in you, you cannot give the $500 or euros and proceed. On the other side, it's literally schizophrenia. You pay 3 euros and can do with the camera, with the biggest you have, by hand, all day long around the monastery, whatever you want. But by our respect, in that cases, I ask, I want to get the permit. I want to feel well like the other ones should feel well with me. But we have some very extreme positions as well. This was a more private situation of the sister. I tried in that case going to the bishop. I was visiting the bishop. The bishop asked me, should I write you something? I said, yes, please. I want to show that to the lady. He said, no, can you not choose another monastery? And I found out there's something behind. And he told me, I have another chance for you. You go to the Minister of Culture. And we said, okay, not a problem. Now we waited already 1 week for the sister. Now we go to the minister. And we wait another 2 days over the weekend, gone to the minister. The minister let me sit down. You want to take a coffee, have a small talk about our process. Later on, he asked me, I heard you want to photograph this monastery. Left and right, 50 kilometers, another ones. Do you not want to choose one of those? And I said, what the hell is going on? Sorry, but it was incredible for us. So later on, he was that open, write me a letter by hand, very much big letters that he does not have to write that much. He wrote it, took a sign in that size, a stamp on it, and said, okay, with that you may be fine, go to the monastery. On the way back to the monastery, we reached another monastery with a very open man. He wrote a lot of books about culture and architectural culture of Romania, and he said, with this stamp alone, you don't go to the sister back, you go back again to the bishop. I have another person next to him, he writes you another letter. Okay, when he's ready, our bishop is out and this guy is out for half a week. Okay, we are fine, we are relaxed, we have enough work on board for years, so we can sit that out. We came back to the bishop place. This man wrote me another small letter, and he asked me again, don't want you to think about again, about choosing another. No, I want to fix on that. And I have those 2 letters, come back to the monastery. Reached the second lady of the 7. The second lady pleased me to come back next week. It was Tuesday, because it was a Christian day and it was a lot of organizations, so they had no time for me. And he said, okay, come again. I came again after the weekend, so we gone up into the mountain. It was pretty hot in the summertime, so we go to the pass up 2,000 meters, worked for a week, come back. Early in the morning at 7, she said, if you come there after breakfast, you have a chance to talk to the sister, Benedetta. I come back, this lady was there. They let me in until the 3rd of those, and then the door was closed again. And she said, no chance at all. We make you the last offer. You pay not the 500 euros, to pay 400 only, otherwise you have to leave. I said, okay, thank you. Maybe once is an exhibition, I display a white, big, nicely framed paper, and I will write this story below and say, sorry, it's a shame for me that I cannot go to the public to show everybody this fantastic view of the facade. So that's the work proceeding sometimes. What happens nearly very often in case if you drive through Europe. Then most extreme, only one sentence for, is Greece. Greece has a ledge that you cannot photograph without having permit old stuff over 100 years old. So no chance at all. If you do that, you be working nearly in a process getting danger for you. And I had the same situations in Greece proceeding my work. So you must go to the culture minister in Athens, but you know how the watches in Athens are working. It's difficult.
I just wanted to thank you for the question because it's a really important one. As a native photographer, the concept of consent. And I think, you know, I would go back to being a cultural anthropology major and my first experiences with Native American photography and the exploitive gaze and the exploitive work that was out there, defining our people, the things in textbooks, that everything was in past tense, and that I wondered whatever went back to the communities as far as these images go. Again, I said I was kind of disillusioned early on about the medium that I had chosen. I set out, and I think as any young photographer, wanted to be a National Geographic photographer, but then quickly realized, you know, that's one of the most exploitive publications in the world. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. And I wanted to work through this problem of how Native American photography can be exploitive. As a Native person, I also realized that becoming the photographer and the storyteller also became a great privilege, a privilege that we had not always been afforded until we were able to afford cameras and formal education for how to learn the science of photography. And it's an incredibly expensive medium. So it was hard work as a young Native person from humble beginnings to become a photographer. I think one of the hardest journeys of my life was to become a professional photographer. And with that, and working through the concept of how photography is exploitive, you have now a Native person beginning to tell the stories of our own people. And we're seeing more and more of that emerge, and that's a really powerful thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but I also I have an interview process that I work with. All of the models and the families that I work with, sometimes it's an idea, sometimes it's their idea. And they come to me and we collaborate. And then we collaborate all the way through the process, and then even collaborate in the post-production. And I'll say, you know, I don't want to pick a photograph in the editing selection that you don't absolutely love, you know, and like, let's take a look at where the illustrative part of the post-production went, and are you still feeling good about it? You know, is this still, and I'm asking questions like, is this giving back to my community? Is this telling a story that needs to be told? Is this giving back to their community in an honorable and respectful way? So all of those questions are really present and at heart for me through the entire creative process. And I pay my models because they're working with me. I also give as many prints as they want back to both themselves and their families. Fine art prints back to them and their families. And I would say I know it's a good one when their grandma wants one. So a rule of thumb for me.
Thank you. I know as museum professionals, we're constantly thinking about how we're presenting people, how we're presenting different cultures, how we're presenting faiths in different ways. And so it's really interesting to hear about your different processes. You brought up post-production. Can you both discuss the role of digital editing and Photoshop in your work, and how do you use it? How has your process changed over time, and how are you seeing that used by your peers?
I became from my side very early in the beginning of the 80s to this technique. So I growed up with it, like walking, like swimming, bicycling. For me, it's not a main course anymore. So my ideas and my visions reach me in front of each facade automatically. So I have the final view nearly in my head before I start any work. And therefore this process goes automatically. More in global, it's a fantastic piece, a fantastic tool. So today we have, by this editing possibilities, the chance like the painters had for thousands of years. So we can now go beyond the laws of opticals. So for me, the photography normally starts at that point, the classical optical reproduction view ends. So you can go further on, you can transport much, much more than you can see on the real site. If you go on those sites, many of you visited a lot of those facades we already did, you'll be disturbed at once from all the surrounding, but on the other side you stay on a point and you see from the below view not this real silent shape like we want to transport. So we want to give you by that technology more information, but not in case of artificial added, more in case of reproduced the truth in a higher level. So the level should show you more that you can ever feel out if you stay there for hours or days. Because you have to move, you have another perspective, you get another feeling for. And what our idea is behind the whole series, not standing in front of the work in case of having that created. No, we want to stay normally at the back. So my way of talking to you today is not very often, so it's my second talk at all. So therefore I want to explain my part is not the language, my part is the making the views you be used to. So the idea is to do this in the respect, in the full respect of the builders, of the architects, of the craftsmanship. Not in case of our term that we be able to do that. So this is the case of all the manipulation, all the development. So this goes automatically in our process.
So this is a really important question for my photography as well, because I do manipulate reality. And I started out in film, and I'm really thankful for that experience because you had to do everything in camera. And even when I switched over to working in digital around 2004 to 2006, it was a learning curve for sure. My formal instructors, my educators, always touted that you must do everything in camera that's possible. And I still work with that mantra in mind that I'm trying to make it perfect in camera and using Photoshop to make it a little more supernatural. And that's where indigenous worldview comes in, where I think I'm really communicating these ideas of like magical realism and these ideas of spirits and supernatural powers and empowering women with supernatural capabilities and these stories of mythology and wondering, you know, sometimes if you look at some of my images of women, you wonder if they're from Earth or not, you know, and that's how I'm using Photoshop, is to create a more powerful story that has a little bit more of at least my own indigenous worldview, and kind of elevating the reality and a celebration of our indigeneity. I had an interesting experience. I said that I left that dream of being in National Geographic behind a long time ago. But last year was approached by National Geographic for their first ever issue, very avant-garde of native photographer issue, with natives representing themselves photographically. And I was one of about 5 or 6 in the December issue of National Geographic. They asked me to submit my photos. They had already looked through my website, and so I submitted those photos, and they chose Coyote Tails, which really surprised me, as an identity story. And then through submission process, they wanted to see my raw files, which are the equivalent of negatives. And so they wanted to know how much photo manipulation had taken place. And I was like, well, I do everything in camera, but there's lots of red, and I added the stars from another image, and I took out a plumbing pipe on the side of the building. And she hemmed and hawed about, well, we don't normally publish those types of photographs. And I was like, well, that's okay. I left the dream of being a National Geographic behind a long time ago, And anyways, they came back and they said, well, we really do want to put this piece in our magazine. And so what we'll do is we will list you and your photograph as a photo illustration. And that for me was really an important learning about myself, because I've been doing this and kind of at a new growing edge of what contemporary Native art is, even within our own arenas, like at the Southwest Association of Indian Arts. There's certain categories that as a Native artist you have to enter into. And my photography, I always want to be honest, if I'm competing or entering in next to film artists, that this is not film. And yes, I use Photoshop. And honesty has always been my best policy as far as what I do. I am not a photojournalist. I am not a photo documentarian, although I am a little bit, but I'm known as a photo illustrator. I think is like the most accurate and honest representation of what I do as a photographer. I find Photoshop very liberating when it comes back to telling those really true stories of identity and imagination. And Diego says I approach my photographs more like paintings, so they are very theatrical and staged, and I am using color and Photoshop in all of those different ways, but you can never fool the human eye with Photoshop. So again, it goes back to trying to do everything in camera and needing that formal film training to be able to make the artwork that I make.
So I think one more question from me, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So the title of this panel is New Photographies. So what's new in new photographies? What emerging themes or trends are you excited about?
As I showed you before a little bit, that we live in our universe of the facades. We had not be influenced in those first 9 years of developing, I told you. We already studied all the traditional photography from Baldus, the Bechers, all the other ones. But they all were limited to the optical laws, and in their time they used the perfect technology what was available. For instance, Protogin Gorski, some of you know him. He started with new technology of color photography in the 1905, exactly 100 years before we started. It's interesting. And he was 15 years traveling through Russia with this new technology. So in his time, it was very impressive to see what can be done with new technology. He used it after a while automatically like a normal tool. So the new photography was now a big change by the digital world, into the digital world. But right now I think the digital world is quite normal. We should not discuss that much anymore for me, from my side, classical or not classical. At the end, for me only is the result speaking for it. And today a lot of things happening by using the new way of photography, that a lot of effects are included in some works. And I always look, like you said before, and therefore I love that kind of feeling you give with your works, to tell a story, to use those tools to transport an idea. First you must have the idea. You can sing, you can jump, you can paint, you can photograph, you can do several type of things. But at the end, it must fascinate and react on the other side, minimum on one person. That's the minimum for me, I say, it's necessary. And therefore, the new photography is a wide range, a very interesting range. So we are sometimes surprised if we visit, for instance, Arles, the Rencontre again, see what's happening with the young ones, happening with the old ones, how they reflected. Sometimes it's copied. A lot of things are recycled as well. They have the right to do. Everybody can do whatever he wants. But for me, I only can see it in my small shell. I live together with Betty. We want to proceed in this very classical view with a lot of ingredients. You could not imagine what's happening behind the thing, but I think that's not necessary to explain, because something is understandable, something is absolutely ununderstandable. So therefore, this floating process like we produced, and it's not a rule I can tell you like a receptor, how is the first, how is the second, how is the third done. Each one is completely different. I showed you before the synagogue in Bucharest. You saw the tree standing in front of it. If you see the final work, it's okay, he was there. And if you Google for it, you find some other images like that, but they are only in the ultra wide angle, the frog perspective. So no proportion is in his right position. And therefore for us, using the new way of development for ourselves, it's get more and more powerful, interesting for us after this long while of 15 years proceeding. First we thought 2 years may be enough for a big project. Now we think three lifetimes minimum for doing a small selection of Europe. I was asked twice, 3 times yesterday and today, when do you think to go to USA? When do you think you go to Asia? You go to South America, go to China as well. We talked before in the past. And this is for us a big wish to do. But first we have to do a strength selection to show the global of the first ID showing Europe. And later on we will see, as long we be fine, we can proceed.
I think what excites me about new photography is high definition. I think we're, as modern photographers, constantly in pursuit of a higher digital resolution. And for me, that's important because I work with humans. And every once in a while, there's something that emerges, like, you know, having eyelashes in focus, or seeing the person's goose flesh on their shoulders. And there's something really exciting about those photographs when you're able to see those small human details. I just believe that humans love humans, and that's part of the fascination with photography, is the intricacies of their faces and their hands and all of the beautiful things that make us alike and different. I think the other thing that really, really excites me, I talked a little bit about at the podium, and that is about, you know, it's been a Anglo male-dominated field for a long time, and now we're seeing a lot more people of color and younger people and women crossing the digital divide and becoming photographers, and they're telling stories, and we're having multiple narratives. So where Native Americans were once narrowly defined in photography as this one thing, that's dangerous to have only one story. And so I'm really excited about multiple narratives. I believe that there's a wealth of content in my own community, and I'm really excited and encourage all young people to pick it up and try it out and tell your own story and be true to your own identity, because nobody can do that for you. And so I think that that's what I'm most excited about.
Excellent, thank you. And on that note, let's open it up to questions in the audience, and hopefully we can bring the lights up. And I know we have folks with microphones. Okay, there's a hand down here.
This is a question for Markus.
Hold on one second. Tom will grab you the microphone. Thanks.
Yeah, this is from Markus. What is the difference between what you are doing and Facebook?
And Facebook? I don't know Facebook. I don't know how it works. I'm absolutely sorry. I cannot answer in that profound question. No, it's the truth. We have no social media on board, neither Betty or me. We not ignorant, but I think this kind of luxury of freedom and being not disturbed by all you're doing, concentrating yourself on your work only. We created our own lifestyle. So we created this truck. I showed you that a little bit more internal before, to understand that we live our vision together 24 hours. And that makes us powerful enough, because it's such a high concentrated work we have to do. I don't want to play with numbers, but I can tell you, if you photographed on several times thousands of single images from different places, rearrange them together. Firstly, we deconstruct the whole facade, and later we reconstruct it again, but with manually manipulation, using the tool like Photoshop we discussed before. But no automatism is in. It's not a giga-stitching. Otherwise, you have only a wide-angle giga-stitched facade. Nothing is true, nothing is fine with the informations. And not the additional parts we add, like creating something further on the normal view. And Facebook, for us, was never the question to look on it, because I must not tell anybody where I'm standing that day, because I only create jealousy. This is not the kind of way that I want to show you before some colorful places of Europe to make you jealous where we are parking. No, 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 no. That's the point, because if I place such stuff on Facebook or other social media, I have no WhatsApp at all. So I have Skype. I use Skype. That's the only tool we use in that case, and the email. And there's a big concentration on that way with whom we contact, with whom we talk. So all they have to respect, never call me directly. They write me a line. Is it possible to talk to you next day, to talk with you this afternoon? There's something urgent. Only my daughter, she's 24, out of university now, so she lives her own life. She can call me directly. Nobody else did. And by that you can a little bit understand why we don't want to go that way of open our production to the public. So therefore I showed you today from outside of the truck some images, but not from inside. If you want to see one from inside, we do it in a private situation.
I'd like to respond to that question too. Just as far as my use of social media, I do use it all. And I think that part of my audience is wanting to create critical visibility for modern Native peoples. And I want them to see themselves represented alongside all the other cultures of the world. And so I actually advocate that, circulate it, share it, that's what it's all about.
Thank you all for participating in the symposium. You all expend an extraordinary amount of time and detail in your work and create such magnificent photography. How much time do you dedicate to thinking about how your images will be framed and how what type of frames you'll use for the photographs?
Go ahead.
So from my side, I was involved in all those processes of printing since the first time. So the first fine art printer came out, I already have them all used for many, many years. So in my case, showing facades with materiality of stone or wood, so non-reflective stuff, I decided to have matte finished paper, not using the high gloss stuff in the chemical world of the chemical world. That makes for a lot of others maybe impressive way to show the high key of the material. For me, it's necessary to keep it back, the presence of the facade, like you have it in the original site. In the original site, you had additional things like rain or fog or high sunshine. So for us, it was the selection quite easy done with the maximum size of paper exists now, 1.52 m. So therefore, the works are 150 wide centimeters. In the future, we get now the option for 1.60 m paper. We can do in a high quality fine art print, and we use that for larger sizes if necessary in the future. For framing in the museum, like you have it presented here, there's mostly needed something in front, plexi or museum's glass. I'm not that happy with it in the total. I like it to see that it's protected if somebody's walking along, but my own produced exhibitions, I showed in the Chase Museum of Art, for instance, I showed in Arles and other spaces. I framed them with a very thin wooden frame. It's an oak frame. We specially constructed with a specialist, so it's only made for us, with an aluminium construction behind, so therefore you can use a very thin wood around, not disturbing the work. And by that, we don't use any glass or plexi in front of it. So therefore you have the full option to go nearby, not getting any reflections. It can be as perfect, but you never held it without any reflections. So therefore you can go nearby, and that's the fascinating thing of the idea to create this level of photography. You can go 20 centimeters in front of, study each figure, each detail, everything. You need a binocular if you go outside to the real side, and you can go only 2 meters back, and our brain together with the eye is the best reproduction tool. You can immediately jump back in milliseconds from the total to the tele. And this change is for understanding the whole building and to study it, to compare it. If you go through an exhibition and have them in a row, 10, 15, 20, 30 of them, you'll be not disturbed anytime, oh, another reflection is coming up. So therefore we invested a lot of power to create it. And for the future exhibitions, if I do museum exhibitions further on, I produce them all and will deliver it to the museum.
For me, that's changed over time with the amount of money that I had. So as a young student, presentation was very difficult. And it was something that I had to work with and present on the basis of what I could afford. Now that I'm able to print and frame the way that I want, I prefer a classic photograph printed by myself. In my studio, I use fine art platine paper, and the framing is very subjective. Oftentimes, I will, at this point in my career, just sell the print, or I can sometimes walk people through that process, but it's museum glass, it's all archival standards, and that's the way I prefer. Some people prefer them mounted and laminated. I did a show last year that was all mounted on dye bond and had an invisible UV laminate over the front, and it was that same idea that Markus was talking about. I wanted to take the glass away because as a photographer, I think we have this lovely experience with the photographic paper that the rest of viewership doesn't get, and we get to get right up at it and look at it and see all of the intricacies of the paper and the texture. So by laminating them with that particular show, it allowed people to get right up to them and have no buffer between them and the photograph, and it was very well received. But I prefer museum glass and classic photography mounting.
Right here in the middle.
Thank you very much. My question, you each have very different ideologies about the role of community and the responsibilities to communities in the production of your work. My question is about what happens once your work is out and about in the world. Have there been surprising interactions with communities once the works are out and about, whether that's through exhibits, publications, or in Cara's case, billboards?
Surprising. Well, let me speak to the billboards first, because that's where you left me off. And I think within my own community, I think, we're really small and rural from there in San Bernardino County. So the idea of 4 little kids from the res being on a billboard completely blew all of our minds, right? And there was, I guess, just a lot of giggling at the idea, we stay in contact through social media. I'm in Santa Fe and they're back home. Kyani's a celebrity, right? That makes us giggle, right? Kyani in Vogue, oh, you know, this is like mind-blowing for our community. But everybody was really tickled, and there was a great sense of pride. And, you know, I think just laughter at the idea of it all. And I'm not sure where the laughter comes from, but it's like some place of like being tickled by it and being surprised by the whole endeavor, you know, taking our images of our little guys that far. And it is a community endeavor. Like, I'm really entrenched and part of that community and grew up there. So even the photography itself has taken me further than I ever thought. With the billboards, I think what surprised me is the number of thank you letters from people in the community that drove by them on their way to work, people wishing that they could stay up and see the billboards every day, that they appreciated seeing them, they appreciated the messaging from Southern California. It was, you know, big messaging that they hadn't seen before in that way. And so that was really a beautiful experience for me to get thank you letters. I think that's my response to that one.
For us, I come again back to our shell. For us, the situation was over those many years, 9 years, not showing anybody. Then first time showed the Köln Dome in Köln at the Photokina, at a special space. It was an incredible reaction. And I was not at the point at this moment, if I saw this reaction, should I show more to the public, or should I proceed in my shell, in the silence, in the luxury situation? But on the other side, we invested the first 10 years, all our money we saved before. There was no way to get any money back in that time, because we decided not doing any jobs anymore. And by all this, we showed the Kölner Dome. We got an arrangement with the major, and the major said, I want to place that in the city. And they say, okay, give it for a charity situation to the city of Cologne. So Cologne should stay in Köln, because the Germans say, the Köln bleibt in Köln, in dialect. But that's not dialect, that's Bavarian. So therefore, we further on thought we show more of our work, and the major said, come on, we show you a good space. You want to show it in the Museum of Applied Art. And we showed it there to the community, and the community said, tomorrow, no, next year, over next year, okay, in 2 years we arranged, and we showed the first works. And it was incredible, the reaction. For us it was fantastic to see how our, in fact, our virus quasi was transported to others and immediately burned in their hearts and their heads. What they finally get presented, an unexpected series of long time investment, not in case of money, not in case of time, in case of hardly power. And those came back in that way that they took us to the several sites and said we want to do exhibitions. So until today we regulated that a little bit, that we still can proceed in our process, not being taken out every month. So therefore I'm very happy to be with you, but I'm very happy to jumping back, Scotty beat me back in my world of working in the facades. So on the other side, you have this long, incredible timeline of those buildings. Our work is only like a click of an eye, reproducing them. We have a timeline over 1,000 years on much of those facades, and they're still in the process of change. So therefore, what we can do now is only to collect the diversity, the powerful things created, and show there to the public. And the public by itself must see them in their own view. They must select it. They can see it in religion. They can see it in philosophy. They can see it in craftsmanship. The next one only to architecture. The next one only get it for creating, free thinking, for another term we don't know. In the several difference of our highly, deeply European culture. So that's the point from our side.
Thank you. So we are just about at time. We're going to break for lunch, and I invite you back at 1:45 for our third panel, Painting Now. And I want to say thank you so much to Markus and Cara.
Thank you.